Okay, we're recording now. Welcome back. And in the previous episode, we discussed the requirements that we had for our carrier, and now we're taking a look at the volumes that we want those requirements to fill in.
As mentioned, we have this we have that kind of 15 by 15 by 50 box that we're looking at, kind of the max size of ship that we want to be able to dock this. So that's represented by the orange frame that you see there. And then, as we mentioned, the Ticonderoga and the Artemis both share a very similar position for the main airlocks. We've laid those out. You can see with the marked black and white measuring sticks, the two kind of airlock mock-ups at the sides there. There are 15 blocks between them. So they're not exactly 15 blocks apart. It's 17 blocks wide with 15 between them. And that kind of gives us an idea of bay. We want it, kind of underslung belly bay for the carrier. And on top of that, we've started mocking up some of the rest of the size of the carrier. We've added 20 blocks to the back, 10 to the front. Bring us up to that overall 80 block kind of max length we were talking about. It's not a firm max, but we want to keep this project under control within the kind of size that we had imagined. So it's good to measure that out and see what you're. And I see it asked pretty often, do you work inside out or outside in? Do you work from the skin, the shape of the ship inward, or do you work from the conveyor system outward? And, how do you generally handle that, Marcelo?
Well, originally I drew a shape that I wanted. That I thought it was going to be the best or the most optimal angle for the turrets, and then I tried to cram things in. As my technique progressed, I decided to do the opposite. I would, place turrets floating and interiors floating, and then build a hole around it. That sometimes it's like I call it, like a free floating interior. So because most of the time I try to make the exterior hole not to touch directly or not to have direct contact with the interior blocks because of the whole popping issue. So yeah, right now I could say that I build from the inside out.
I tend to build outside in. I'll often sketch, orthogonic views of the ship that I have in mind, so I can see, side elevation, front elevation, rear elevation. Get a good idea of what it's going to look like in 3D, and then take that into SE and start really getting an idea of the size of it by just kind of bulking it out and getting the basic shapes in. I've skipped the drawing portion this time because we want you guys to be able to see the techniques here and apply them to yourselves, and not everybody's going to be good at sketching.
Exactly.
But in terms of outside in versus inside out, I do work, I mostly work the outside in for the appearance, and then I treat the inside like a puzzle. How do I fit in everything I want? But sometimes you'll have an idea for a conveyor system, a certain arrangement of parts that, everything just fits together in your head, and it's like, oh, I should use that. And I've kind of had that here with the hydrogen tanks. I tend to like the hydrogen tanks on the outside of the ship. They're very durable. They look cool, gives you a nice greeble. And in this case, I wanted to make sure that they could all be paired with welders. So I don't want to go more than 2 blocks long, because that's what you can get with one welder's 2 tanks next to each other. And you can also surround the welder on all 4 sides with more tanks, so you can actually repair 4 large tanks off of just one welder. We're not maximizing that quite yet. Might fill out this interior here with more tanks. We do want a passageway through here as well. That'll come later. But for right now, just kind of imagining sort of a semicircle of tanks we get an idea of just how tall this will be. We did want to sink the bay in to the ship by a few blocks, so we've got it set at about 5 blocks in the bay, hidden up inside the belly of the ship, leaving about 10 blocks exposed beneath. And then we've got the ship going up another 10 blocks or so. That gives us that kind of 50-50 split I was talking about between the length of the arms hanging down and the actual bulk of the ship above it. So sometimes you have an idea for an inside, the conveyoring, the functional parts of the ship, and sometimes you have good ideas for the outside, and you shouldn't limit yourself.
Yeah,
inside
exactly.
out versus outside in. Take the ideas you have and use them.
Yeah, it's not like an absolute rule that building from the outside in is just aesthetic, or like building from the inside out is a more functional one. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Sometimes a shape that you have in mind, an exterior shape, it ends up being more efficient. So
And talking about loose rules is another kind of rule of thumb I have, which is the proportion of a ship in terms of length versus width.
true.
And I find generally that a ship that's about as quarter as wide as it is long, it'll look good. It'll look like a ship. If you start going too fat, then you kind of just have a box. If you go too thin, it'll look real sleek, but you may not have enough room for everything you need in there. And if you go far too thin, it's just a pole. So 1/4 beam to width, or beam to keel, is about the right ratio.
Yeah, sometimes that's those dimensions are something that you want to play with, especially if we're talking all vanilla, for example. The range of the turrets in the current vanilla turrets are really really limited. It's just like 800 meters is close to nothing. So if the ship is too long, we jokingly said that your face is doing something while your ass is doing a different thing, and sometimes you don't want that, but sometimes you just want to like dip in, like like a reinforced bow of the ship that would have decoys or maybe like weapons to the sides, and that's intentional. You just want to have like that protected prow to be engaged and protect the, let's say, the more squishy bits of the ship that are usually located towards the aft section, and keep them outside of the range of the turrets. So it's something that we should consider.
So we've got the orange box here. That represents the frigate area. That's where the frigate will go. And that gives us a definite floor for the bottom of the ship. At least the bottom floor of the bottom deck of the ship. That's right here. Now we're going to go with a deck height of 2 blocks between floor and ceiling. That gives us enough space for us to move around, and also space above conveyors, and other conveyors, lights, everything we need. So.
Mhm. So would you like to lay the first deck, or?
I'm going to for that, since we know where the main deck is going to be. Above that, I like to build a strong spine in my ships. The thing I really hate is somebody cutting my ships in half.
Yeah.
So go straight heavy armor for this. Go full length. So that right there. Keep our ship together. Stem to stern. And this is also good because that's also the height that we want to have our main hangar deck. And it's just a generally good idea to build your hangar floors out of heavy armor or blast doors for the better resistance against small thrusters and accidental bumps and dents. So talking about what I said earlier about general beam to keel ratios, we're going to fill this out quick to about 20 blocks wide. Go 19 blocks wide just to start with and see how that is. So if you're not artistically inclined, generally when you're drawing, you'll kind of rough out basic shapes with just loose lines. We'll draw just a kind of a wedge for the hips, a kind of round shape, rib cage, circle for the head. You're just getting the basic shapes and forms in. And so it's kind of the same thing here with this ship. You're just building up the kind of basic shapes and seeing how big it is in proportion to each other and getting an idea of, is this too big? Is it going to look like ass? Just
yeah, look like
from the beginning. Is it going to look unbalanced? So let's see. We talked about our fighter pads before, so we're gonna need them to be 5 wide. So let's just build a quick fighter pad here in the corner. So if we look at that, and then we look at the center of the ship, if we want to have, say, a central hangar through the middle, we're going to have hangar doors. Aiming at the door and it's not placing. Come on.
block placement has been really, really wonky. So for this carrier, we're not gonna do individual hangars for each fighter like we have done before, or
that was another decision that we made early on when we were just talking about concepts. Is we don't want to devote a lot of interior space to hangars. We've done that on both of our carriers before. My Piedmont and Appalachia is Rhea and Celine. They both had a lot of interior space dedicated to fighters, and that's good in a way. You can make a big, impressive ship, but it's actually a lot of empty space. And so that saves on performance and materials, but it's generally not very useful space.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really iffy landing fighters, especially in small confined hangars in multiplayer, because you might get lag or desync anything happening at any time, and you just crash through your hangar, ruin a fighter, you ruin part of your ship, and everybody's very angry. So interior hangars, kind of difficult to land in, risky. Plus, with the issues Keen has had with landing gear and connectors and things, sometimes just randomly disconnecting. You don't want fighters that you think are parked and safe inside your ship to just come loose and fly through your entire ship and accelerate.
Yeah.
So we'll have some hangars for just a little bit of storage and maybe building in there or something, but we don't want to focus on a carrier that carries most of its fighters inside. We want a lot of deck pads on the surface. It's easier to land and take off from, safer to soar.
Yeah, and especially if the fighters are not getting damaged, if they're mostly like, for example, torpedo bombers, that they're not going to be directly engaged, we can just have them touch and go and keep going, like a higher sortie rate by doing that.
Right. Because you can take off and land a lot faster. But for our purposes here, if we look, we can see, okay, we've got this basic 5x5 pad. We've got the door. And then we can measure 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 including the center line, which means our middle will be 7 blocks, 3 on each side plus the center line. Which makes for a good, easily passable area. But I think we're going to want to make the deck a little bigger because we don't want to be landing right up against the...
I mean, I have a rule for that, and it's that leaving at least one block in between the actual, pad space and whatever comes next.
We want to go at least 1 block wider on each side, but maybe 2 blocks if we want to have 1 block safety space around the outside edge. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. 2 is fine.
So we'll go 2 blocks wider on each side. Just measure that out real quick.
And we're building these entirely of heavy armor, right?
Yeah, just heavy armor for now. We do plan to make this carrier out of composite armor. Heavy armor on the places that need it, light armor on the places that don't. Save weight, save resources. Because again, we want this buildable in survival. So we can't just be like, well, we'll just make everything out of heavy armor. And if it takes a lot of thrust move, who cares? Because we can just creative on more thrusters. And we want to make it balanced. We want to make it able to move itself without having to mine for days just to get the fuel to move 5 minutes.
Also, I think, if I remember correctly, current ships are not armored anymore, but one of the fewer ships that retains armoring are carriers on their deck, but not necessarily to, because they're going to be shelled or anything like that. It's due to the stresses of, of what that part of the ship is going to take.
So we can pretty safely say that a lot of that it's going to be heavy armor 7 blocks in. So we may not use all of that space for pads. But again, we're just kind of sketching the ship out, getting an idea. So what do you think we should do next?
Well, I just had a quick idea here. We talked about like a printing section for rearming torpedo bombers. I was thinking that those areas would designate 2 for the sake of redundancy, and also, like we talked about before, like a faster sortie rate. So maybe those could be like, hybrid, like the hangar / repair rearm station.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to put like one to the front and one to the back, or maybe 2 of them towards the front with an axis in the middle. I don't know.
I think that can wait till we actually work on the filling out the island in the middle.
Okay. So in that case,
but we can quickly mock up the nav bridge.
Yes.
We do want a tower somewhere. Where do you think? I think somewhere towards the back, but all the way at the back, kind of maybe like a third of the way.
I say like either before this hangar or after. Maybe after the hangar, like behind it.
No, I don't want to put it directly over the fuel tanks.
Okay, so in that case, ahead.
I mean, especially if we want to do like a staircase through the decks, we're gonna need a bit of side to side room. So
I think
it would probably be better at least here.
I may move the
And we may not want to put fighters all the way at the back here, if we want to kind of blend the tank area into the fighter bay area. So
true.
We may not have this hangar here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So I have a suggestion for that. Let's make a single stairwell, and that would link up all of the decks, and we could put, like important places that the players need to go to. For example, that the staircase would be directly connected to the med bay for spawning and cryo, and also have access to the fire pads and the CIC and the nav bridge. So it could be sandwiched in between any of those that I mentioned.
Let's I think I tend to like to offset my my hallways to one side of the ship. I don't like them running straight down the center. Mostly because it gives you the opportunity to use bigger rooms on one side.
I like that.
But it's not quite as important with a ship this big, because you're gonna have tons of space.
Yeah.
But that would still kind of mean maybe we want the stairway like here on the right, or maybe we do 2 stairways, so you don't have to walk all the way across the ship. Just go up and down. So maybe we do like 1 stairway front left, 1 stairway back right.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I like that idea.
In which case we probably want the nav tower about here.
Yes, that's a good location. Let me see from afar, see where you are. Yeah.
Oh, I moved. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Usually, one thing with the islands or bridges or not bridges, it's that I personally tend to put them towards the back somehow. At least in my mind, that makes the ship look a bit more sleeker, less,
Yeah. And plus, it gives you a good. You can both look forward at where the ship is going, and also look down and forward and see all the fighters.
Yeah.
So you can see what's going on the deck.
So that way you don't have to build like a second air control tower. Like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a design philosophy because, for example, the thing that the Queen Elizabeth carrier, from Britain, they do that. They have a separate air control tower. But here, like this kind of game that we're playing, you don't have an entire flight control crew. Could be just maybe the same person that is flying the ship is gonna be looking up for the fighters. So single tower should be fine.
So let's slap something down there and just say kind of tower goes here. You think about that tall?
Yeah, should be fine.
So if you look at it in profile, you can start to get an idea of how the ship is coming together.
I quite like it.
All right, and the other thing was we wanted a kind of overlook, a way to kind of look down into the hangar and see kind of what's going on. Well, not the hangar, the frigate bay, and kind of see what's going on there. So we've got the end of the main deck here. We're going to go down 2 blocks, and that'll be the next deck. And so that's here. Come across.